Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of KSP Resurgence. Today we're starting out the episode by blowing up my interstellar vehicle. Forgot to auto-strut, and when I did auto-strut it in the game, it ended up exploding the entire thing. So I did do some auto-strut, but I had to do it in game since it was already being built. Thankfully I was able to get it to work, and I did have to turn on unbreakable joints for a second because for some reason the Kraken really wanted to keep disconnecting my antimatter factory on this interstellar vehicle. Yeah, what am I doing with this interstellar vehicle? Well, I've been playing this save file for quite a while. I've explored every single body in the home star system, Harmonia. So it's about time I go interstellar. Now, Celestial Harmony adds a star called it's called the Chaos system. It's actually a binary system, quite a few planets of its own, and I'm gonna explore one of them today. It's actually gonna be a gas giant called Farewell. And I'm hoping to land on one of its moons, Sublime, which is a really cool habitable world with mushrooms everywhere. It also has a really cool blue mystical prairie that I'm also going to land on. Well, that'll be the next episode because I did have to cut a whole lot out, and this still ended up being quite long. So there is a whole lot of groundwork that has to be done when preparing an interstellar vehicle. I did all the building part and all the resource gathering parts in previous episodes, but now I just gotta send the mission package up to this interstellar vehicle. I have to send the landers, the space planes, and of course I also have to send up some spare resources to refuel said spacecraft. Now this spacecraft runs on a beam core antimatter engine. It's a really efficient one. I believe it's the most efficient part in the game. Now here are the first two launches, those being some additional crew and the first heavy lander. This heavy lander here, the one on the right, is actually powered by lithium, similar to my smaller lander that I've used in previous missions, except this one is just bigger, has more crew. It's kind of cool, to be honest, similar to the other one. The one on the left is like a lithium tanker, because I felt like I didn't have enough fuel for all the landings I was going to do with this one lander. So I decided to bring up some lithium fuel as some refueling options so we can reuse this lander a lot more and land on a lot more vacuum bodies. Because I believe there's like only 2 or 3 moons and planets that will actually have a space plane be viable to land on, because all the other ones either have atmospheres that are way too thin or just don't have atmospheres. There are only 2 moons actually in the Chaos system that actually have sizable atmospheres. Those being Sublime and another one called Nostal, if I recall correctly. Both of those are going to be really interesting places to visit, and I'll actually be visiting Sublime today. So here we are doing the rendezvous on both sides. I really would like to swap out this multi-vessel tracking screen for something else. This is a cool little thing I pull out when I want to have 2 launches in one clip just to save time. I cut a whole lot of filler out of this video just because I really wanted to fit the first interstellar landing in this one episode. It won't be much, I won't be doing too much exploration on Sublime today, but there will be way more in the next episode when I have more time. I want to aim for around like 25 minutes-ish, just because I feel like it's a really good time for Kerbal Space Program videos. Not too short, where it's just all boring mission preparation stuff in one episode, and not too long, so that everyone will just stop watching in 2 seconds in. Anyway, both of these dockings are going pretty well. If you're wondering where their huge glowing radiators come from, they're from Sterling Systems. It's a great mod that adds a bunch of cool near future and far future parts. I believe it's also responsible for some of the fuel cells powering my heavy lander. Because those lithium engines will not be able to be powered with a nuclear reactor of the same size. Anyway, both of these landers are just going... Well, there's only one lander. The other's like a communications relay and the survey scanners, because I did forget to put those on the original craft. It also has an oxidizer tank because those fuel cells only use oxidizer. They haven't been patched for chemical technologies, which is another mod I have that deprecates oxidizer. Now, I do want to talk about this far future space plane. I call it the Helion. It's a really advanced single-stage to orbit that space plane. Now, if you're wondering where the center engine's from, it's from a mod called Impulse Party. It has some cool far future plasma engines. And it's actually supposed to be a fusion engine, but since it only accepts electric charge, it can be powered with anything else. We'll also use this hydrogen too, but I use the same fuel cells, the Stirling system fuel cells, to power this. So it's not really a fusion engine, it's just kind of like false advertising. But it still gets me way more Delta V than any of the other older plasma engines I use for any single stage to orbit applications. Now, since this also uses liquid hydrogen, I can take fuel from the interstellar vehicle and use it as propellant, instead of having to send up a separate fuel tank with my heavy lander. And this doesn't use too much liquid hydrogen compared to the interstellar vehicle, so I can refuel this without making too much of a dent in my Delta V. Now, Delta V wise, I'm not too worried about my interstellar vehicle. It can like make a two-year trip to the Chaos system in with only like a quarter or sixth of its fuel. So it can do a 4-year round trip with plenty of fuel to spare. My main concern is that how I'm going to refuel this thing if I'm not just going to start using warp drives as soon as I'm done with this first mission. I mean, I'd like to do another interstellar mission without warp drives before I phase out the Excalibur, as I call it, which is my interstellar vehicle that's showing up in physics range right now. And of course I go screaming past it because this has too low TWR in this space plane, so I really do not know when to start burning. I also really like the cool paint job on this space plane. It's a cool, kind of like a chrome-ish color. I mean, some parts haven't been colored because they're not really compatible with textures and limited recolor depot, which is what I use to recolor all my parts. But it still looks amazing as it is. I mean, the editor, the landing gear looked a bit more unified, but now in actual flight you can tell that's definitely not colored. Now, you may be wondering how I got this gravity ring. Now, it's actually the same gravity ring from Tenacity, but I just clipped 2 of them together, kind of like give it a bit more seating and make it look cooler. And also, Jebediah is the lone Kerbal who's actually flew this thing all the way from my Creek colony. Sounds like a very Jebediah thing to do. I also have these solar panels on my space plane just to give some extra power so I don't have to use my fuel cell and drain all its fuel. You know, the Stirling fuel cells are very similar to like batteries you buy at the store. They use chemical reactions like redox reactions to generate electricity. So it's literally just a giant battery in my well, not the rechargeable ones like the stock game has. It's kind of like a Duracell battery, if you will. Yeah, I could use a fusion reactor because Impulse Party with the mod that adds that cool vacuum engine I have on here. It also adds a few fusion reactors, but I have not unlocked them yet, so fortunately I cannot add them. But I believe they would have been better for fuel longevity. They use fusion pellets though, which are pretty expensive. Thankfully I'm not playing career mode, so the only reason I'm not going to do that is because it's kind of cheaty. You know, we had a little weird issue where I just no-clipped through the Excalibur for seemingly no reason. Maybe it's because I used too much time warp. We docked successfully. Now, I am going to send up a bit more crew because, well, these launches are kind of out of order because I wanted to combine the 2 rocket launches together. So, the extra crew I sent in the rocket launch was actually after this space plane because for some reason, all the crew I put in the crew cabins suddenly disappeared when I launched it again. Maybe it's because I reverted and it didn't save the seating arrangements for some reason. So that's why I had to send up that launch. You know, this is the Phoenix SSTO I designed a few episodes back with a few minor changes. First of all, it has some extra seating capacity for more Kerbals. Unfortunately, I didn't use it. It also has those old plasma engines replaced with these much higher tech ones and much more efficient. This is practically like extremely well for interplanetary. I could do like a direct transfer to any single body and force an encounter, similar to how I do it with Tenacity with this SSTO. Like, I'm not joking. Sure, I may only be able to do one way and have to refuel at a colony, but it's still a really long-range SSTO. You could practically go anywhere except for Interstellar, unless you tie it to a mothership. When I unlock warp drives, I really do want to do an interstellar SSTO, just because I feel like the whole thing of having a space plane that you can like fly anywhere within a really reasonable amount of time seems really attractive to me. Fortunately, we are still decently far from unlocking warp drives, though I do believe I have some really primitive ones, some tiny warp drives. But that might be an artifact within how the science tech tree is programmed. Anyway, we are preparing to dock and do the final approach. But unfortunately, it won't let me time warp because persistent thrust is being a pain, like it always is. So I have to disable it on every engine on Excalibur, so I'll be able to time warp again. It's the most annoying thing ever. Anyway, here we are, we have a successful dock, and we'll transfer the Kerbals over. Now I'm not going to leave the space plane in orbit, so I actually figured this with a probe core so that I can transfer all the Kerbals on board and be able to control it on the way down. Now this landing did went pretty well, though I did have to retry a few times, because for some reason Phoenix, unless I'm flying it completely straight, like it's facing prograde all the way down, if I dare to like pitch up or down a few degrees, just spins completely out of control. I really gotta design a new heavy transport space plane. See, here we go. I turn a little bit and it just spins out of control. And I never get to regain control because it always like goes backwards for some dumb reason. But this time I was able to regain control. I really gotta make a new design. If you're wondering where I got these OPT waterfall effects, I got from a mod. It's called a Mod Waterfall Configs, I think. It's a little difficult to find on Google just because it's kind of a niche mod, so it's more difficult to find when you search it up. But it's a great mod, adds waterfall configs for a lot of older mods. I believe it's still being updated too. Here we are approaching the KSC, and they're preparing to make our landing. Now, the thing I hate about atmospheric landings like this is because I can never perfectly align myself. I'm always like going like the wrong direction. I'm always going slightly crooked. And I actually did get a pretty good landing, but unfortunately our brakes weren't strong enough when we ended up flying off the runway. Thankfully, I disabled parallax collisions. If I didn't do that, I would have crashed into the tree and exploded everything. Now, I did put a flashing lights warning on the screen for a minute, just because modded Kerbal Space Program, when you go interstellar, it's riddled with bugs, most of them visual. Like you can look down there, my nav ball is having a seizure. And this is also really annoying glitch, where your spacecraft will flash white repeatedly. It's like the worst thing ever. So if you're like photosensitive, I would highly advise you skip to the time I put on the little marker I put on. Yes, here's the visual glitch I'm talking about. It's like really bad, especially with sped up footage. And now my nav ball is also having a whole party down there. And what's worse is that my patched connects are broken. In case you didn't know, patched connects are basically what tells you. It's like your orbit lines. It tells you when you're making a counter with something. They're kind of broken for the long duration of this trip, so I couldn't really plot a maneuver that well until I got relatively close to the chaos system. So in the end, I did have to make a few attempts, and my spacecraft also exploded because when you use high time warp and antimatter tanks, for some reason, like electric charge doesn't work that well. And it thinks you're out of electricity even though you're not, so all your antimatter leaks and makes your spaceship explode. I kinda got around this by draining all my antimatter and just using my antimatter factory when I got there. So in the end, I did end up in the sphere of influence. Despite this, I still the visual glitch is still bothering me. That won't actually go away until I enter this gas giant's sphere of influence. This is a farewell. It's a nice, cool, bluish gas giant with quite a few moons, 4 to be exact. Be landing on the most interesting one, that being Sublime. It's interesting because it harbors life. Very cool place with lots of cool planets. I can't wait to go visit all these. Next episode is going to be crazy because it'll all be dedicated to interstellar travel. I'm gonna do a grand tour of this gas giant, and then I'll probably do a grand tour of the next gas giant, Melancholia, which is also in this star system. Though there is like a minor dwarf planet in between them. I think it's called Klost, if I recall correctly. I would like to visit that also on the way there. There is another planet closer than Farewell. It's called Refuse, but I'm afraid to go there because at sea level, temperature is like 1,000 degrees Kelvin, which is like extremely hot. I'm afraid that if I go there, my entire spaceship's gonna explode due to overheating. So for that reason, I'm probably gonna avoid it, at least for now. Until I get warp drives. Maybe I'll revisit it when I get warp drives, just to make things a little easier for me. Or maybe I'll turn on the ignore max temperature cheat like I did for Daysar, but I don't want to cheat. I don't want to cheat. That would be unfair. I only cheat if it's like to counteract glitches, similar to how I enabled ignore unbreakable joints and no crash damage when I launched this interstellar vehicle for the first time. Because the cracking, like tearing it apart and ripping the antimatter factory straight out of the truss segment. I like to mention we did have similar issues when I launched it and auto-strugging the booster engines. Now, I don't think you need booster engines to get it off the ground, but my headcanon says that I don't want to vaporize the guys in the colony back at home when I launch this. So that's kind of beside the point right now, because it's been 2 years since I've launched to this. It's pretty crazy how I'm actually able to get this so far away from the stock system, the base system. Not the stock system, this is modded. It's pretty cool how this can do a one-way trip in 2 years only. That means you can do a round trip in 4 years. Anyway, it's really hard to get science when all your science experiments are flashing. I can't see anything like this. However, once I entered the sphere of influence, the visual glitches, they just stopped. It's a miracle. No more flashing. I'm not sure if they'll start again if I exit the sphere of influence. Hopefully they don't. But yeah, like since I'm since I'm in the sphere of influence of this new planet, they've gone away. So that's all good. The epilepsy warning's lifted now. This is Sublime. Not Sublime, this is Farewell. It has a moon called Sublime. Oh boy. Anyway, I'm gonna go EVA and get some science. Now, I'm not sure if this is intentional or anything, but the science output is actually surprisingly low for an exoplanet. Heck, even Sublime's science output was like somewhat low. I was expecting like hundreds of science just for a mystery report. It's actually, I'm not sure if it's intentional, it's just awfully low for me, considering how hard it was to get here. Anyway, I'm going to do some mid-course corrections and some inclination changes just to make sure I can get a good encounter with Sublime here. Now, Sublime, despite being very similar to Sanctar and Kerbal or whatever homeworld you have, its life evolved very differently. It has, instead of like trees and stuff, it has like mushrooms everywhere, kind of similar to Lathe. Well, we'll be seeing a little bit of that this episode, but I'll be landing on the shores, so there's not going to be any trees or anything. Or giant mushroom trees, I should say. I wonder what they taste like. Get a screenshot opportunity there. Might use that as a thumbnail. Once again, I must get all the science I possibly can, because I'm going to need a lot of science when I reach back home to get some warp drives. You may be wondering how I actually have a connection to the Kerbal Space Center this far away. It's because Celestial Harmony actually adds a part of its own. It's actually an interstellar communication dish that has like nigh unlimited range. So we can communicate with any planet, you can communicate back to the Kerbal Space Center from anywhere. Yeah, I may be wondering why my beam core antimatter engine plume looks a little different. It's because I got a mod for that changes the plume to make it look more like the ones from the Avatar series. It's made by YGTE, I think it was, if I remember correctly. Great mod, it revamps a few other plumes. It's a good mod, I would suggest it. Anyway, I'm going to do a slight, well, not a slight inclination change. I'm going to get into a polar orbit, just because I do want to give this a nice survey scan, because I would like to see what Sublime's resources are, because I might want to colonize this place. Now, I do a survey scan of this, and the resources actually look pretty nice. The only thing that's lacking is helium-3, because, well, this is an atmospheric planet, so any radiation that would create helium-3 is just non-existent at the surface. I also did want to get Kerbal on, just so I can plot a landing zone. Kerbal is like one of those underrated features in Kerbal Space Program, because like nobody uses it just because of how inconvenient it is to set up, but it's actually really cool. It lets you look at the biomes, it lets you find Easter eggs. Now, I didn't find any Easter eggs on Sublime, but I know there are some on other planets. Or moons, I should say. A whole lot of the bodies I'm going to be visiting this episode and the next one are moons. Once again, I must make some orbital changes, because I do want to have a nice low orbit, just to kind of give our crew members an easy time descending and landing on Sublime here. Now, this little spot right here I do want to land on, but Kerbal isn't working because I don't have an direct access connection with the Kerbal Space Center. Because for Kerbal to work, you need to have a connection back to the Kerbal Space Center, which is mildly annoying considering most of the time it's being blocked by whatever body I'm orbiting, and sometimes even by the gas giant. So I set up some waypoint with Kerbal, and now I'm going to take the Helium SSTL for a joyride. The other thing that really bugs me about Kerbal Space Program is a resource transfer, because if you want to take resources from like a bunch of fuel tanks into a bunch of other fuel tanks, it's really difficult. Like, you can either like take resources into one fuel tank or out of one fuel tank, and it just ends up being really lopsided and destroys your center of mass. Thankfully, that wasn't too much of an issue, but the fuel distribution was somewhat lopsided. I do have to shut this engine down on the Excalibur just because there's this weird glitch of the persistent thrust where the throttle is shared across all vessels in the physics range, even if they aren't docked to each other. So that has really bugged me and caused some really nasty moments in some previous episodes. But here we are descending into Sublime's atmosphere. You can see all the red vegetation and all the cool mountains and the shores. Doing to make sure I have my action group set up, because I will be using the atmospheric engines only just for the descent, because I want to save the hydrogen for the vacuum flight in the ascent, because these atmospheric engines actually do not have enough TWR to take off. They need some help from that vacuum engine, which actually doesn't lose a whole lot of thrust in an atmosphere. So it is a viable option. I was worried that I overheat here, but the overheating part turned out to just be the ladder. Now that actually was an important part, because the Kerbals can't get back on board unless I retract the landing gear. And in case you don't know, if you retract the landing gear while you're landing on a planet, and then extend it and try to take off, the game will still think you're landed, which is like a really odd glitch. It's the false landing state glitch. It's really annoying. If you're in a false landing state and trying to take off, you can actually see on the map screen there's no orbit lines, and also your screen vibrates aggressively for some reason. I do want to make sure I actually land on the ground, so I will be making a little bit of flight here. Now, at higher speeds, these engines actually are somewhat capable of keeping your sustaining your speed, but at lower speeds, it needs a little bit of help from the center engine. Now, the shores are the best place to land just because they are nice and flat and not too rocky either. Even if there were too many rocks, I have disabled parallax collisions just because they're sometimes glitchy. So here we are coming down for a landing. We did bounce around a little bit, but thankfully the brakes are more than enough to slow down. And here we are, the first interstellar landing of the series. I do want to make sure I get on a more flat space before I go on EVA, get all the science. First interstellar landing of the series. As you know, all the work I did to put this together, all the previous missions I did, it all comes up to this point, which is really crazy. This is the first interstellar landing, but definitely not the last. Now, this guy's gonna get out and do all the science experiments. Because, what's the point of visiting these bodies if you're not gonna get any science and learn about them? Anyway, we'll be collecting all these science experiments, and then I'm gonna get all the Kerbals out on EVA. Some cool free IVA moments, too. I'm going to retract those air brakes just because I don't really need them, and I do want to deploy my solar panels. And now I'm going to get all the Kerbals out on EVA. Just kind of celebrate and take a cool screenshot. Now, a weird thing that happens here is that since the ladder is kind of placed in a weird spot, whenever I get a Kerbal out on EVA, he can't climb down the ladder, he just falls and breaks a bone or something. Thankfully, Kerbals, they're durable, they don't die or anything, just get up and keep walking. So this SSTO I would consider a great success. It flies great, it didn't... Healing over here, it did not stumble or like flip out of control like my Phoenix SSTO did. So who knows, I might repurpose this and use it as a crew SSTO at some point. Although I may need a bigger SSTO for more ambitious missions. Anyway, we only have a few more Kerbals left. There are 7 Kerbals on this total. All the seats are filled up. If you're wondering where the cockpit comes from, it's the hypersonic cockpit from a Mark II expansion. It's a great mod, although it's slightly dated. It doesn't really align with like the restock style. It's more like stock-alike, not restock-alike, and also it doesn't really have any waterfall blooms. Although there are configs, it's just really not the best. But the products are still great, and it's compatible with Textures Unlimited Recolor Depot. So it's great for single-stage to orbit spaceplanes. Not to mention, I also did add some RCS ports from internal RCS to really make this spaceplane stand out. Now, as you can see, I jumped and put it and used the RCS jetpack as hard as I could, but I could barely get off the ground, which is why I packed that lander. Even if I did have that issue where I couldn't get off the ground, I'd still did put a probe core on this, so I could fly it without crew. So I could have just used the landing gear just in case something happened, but thankfully that wasn't necessary because this ladder we were very, very useful. I gotta get all the Kerbals back inside, and then we're gonna take off. I should have sped this part up. Nobody wants to see a bunch of Kerbals getting in and out of a spaceship. Still, it does look beautiful, especially with all the reflections. Now, eventually we're going to actually land on another biome in the Sublime system. But unfortunately, that will have to wait because that will be in the next episode. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you all later. Bye!